Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Quills and Spills, a podcast devoted to the juicier side of literary life. We will uncover many classics and the authors who wrote them. For this first episode, I wanted to do something related to Halloween and spooky season. So, naturally, I thought of the creation of Dracula and Frankenstein, which actually happened in the same year with the same group of people. So, let's go back to the year without a summer, cold and dreary in June, where the air is frozen and storms are raging daily. Let's go back to when a group of very young, very talented, and very messy artists holed up in an old mansion and created stories that still enchant us to this day. So, imagine this. It's June 1816, and a year prior, a massive volcano in Indonesia released almost 120 million tons of sulfur into the stratosphere. As a result, global temperatures have dropped to extreme wintry conditions. Crops and livestock have died, while the rest of the human population is just trying to figure out how are they going to survive. Well, almost everybody. 17-year-old budding author Mary Wollstonecraft and her 24-year-old husband, the radical romantic poet Percy Shelley, refused to accept this depressing reality. They had other plans. Now, having been secretly married for a couple of years, the two were basically living embodiments of a new philosophy of free love. And yeah, I'm not kidding. Free love, 19th century, not the hippies. These are the first free love people. And it was actually a very fashionable philosophy in the artistic and intellectual circles during that time. I mean, even Mary's own parents practiced that through their relationships and even some of the things they wrote. But ironically, Mary's father, William Godwin, heavily disapproved of her relationship with Percy and refused to give his blessing. Maybe it had something to do with Percy reminding him too much of himself. Perhaps it had something to do with Percy already having been married with a family of his own. Regardless of the reasons, Mary defied her father and spent years traveling around Europe with Percy to avoid seeing him. Now, along for the ride was Mary's stepsister, the restless Claire Claremont. An aspiring actress with a knack for the theatrical, Claire, born Jane, then changed to Clara, and then finally Claire, found home life rigid and stale and joined Mary and Percy for the thrill of it all. Several attempts were made by her mother to bring her back, but Claire flatly refused, too enamored with the freedom she found on the road with her stepsister and her stepsister's husband. But it wasn't all fun and games. Many times the three youths found themselves in debt and barely scraping by. Matters were only made worse when Mary became pregnant and was refused any help by her father. After losing the child prematurely, she became racked with dark dreams and visions. Even though she conceived twice once again, those visions stayed with her, coming to fore that very summer that she and her husband and her stepsister all made the trek to Lake Geneva in the Swiss Alps to stay with their friend, Lord Byron. Now, during this period, 28-year-old Byron was basically the king of the Romantics and possibly the most famous young writer in the world. Having achieved almost immediate success with his 1812 work, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, he was known for his brooding personality, decadent behavior, and fashionable clothing. In a lot of ways, he was a prototype of the modern celebrity, like a literary James Dean of the 19th century. And I mean, people chased him down the street. They gave him locks of hair in the mail. They even followed a diet he started to keep a slimmer physique. So he was really like a huge influencer of that early 19th century. But The literary rock star wasn't alone. Keeping him company was his personal physician, John William Piodori, who, by the age of 20, had already received his doctorate. Piodori was a fascinating yet largely unassuming figure, able to remain stealth and blend in without suspicion. Perhaps that was why he was offered £500 by a publisher to keep a diary of his travels with Lord Byron, just so that could be published, because Byron was such a hot property. Anything related to him sold. Well, that record actually would become an essential key to one of these two fascinating stories. Now, as the fivesome made themselves at home in the Villa Diodati, it became clear that the dynamics were devoured by drama. For one, Mary was convinced that Percy and Claire had had an affair. For years, she had suspected it, while Percy did not exactly discourage the notion, believing free love was the only philosophy one should follow. Even wilder, Claire had discovered she was pregnant, not by Percy, but by his best friend, Lord Byron. Yes. Prior to their arrival at Lake Geneva, Claire and Byron had carried out a crazy, tumultuous affair, despite Byron also already being married with a family like Percy. However, once finding out about Claire's condition, Byron wanted nothing to do with her or his unborn child and refused to acknowledge the truth, even while they were staying together. It was under this immense stress which Claire felt she had to convince Byron to take responsibility. As tensions flared and the weather worsened around them, the five had no other option but to try to entertain one another. So, as expected with a group of writers, they naturally passed the time by reading and telling stories. They discussed Wordsworth and Rousseau, they flipped through Tasso and Coleridge, but then one particularly dark and stormy night, Byron suggested they should have a contest to see who could conjure the scariest story. A story did not come immediately to Mary. Already consumed with her frayed emotions regarding her husband and her stepsister, her mind allowed very little space for creativity. However, a few nights later, after discussions of reanimation with Byron and Percy, a restless Mary became possessed by her own tortured nightmares. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together, she said. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then on the working of some powerful engine show signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half vital motion. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world. Surely a part of these visions indeed came from the discussions about reanimation she'd had just hours prior to bed. But another part of these visions appear to have come directly from her own disturbed psyche at the time. Frankenstein, which was released anonymously 2 years later, appears not simply an attempt to entertain her friends, yet also a vehicle to channel what she felt during that year without a summer of rattled emotions and reckless abandon. But what about Dracula, you might ask? Wasn't that written by Bram Stoker? And when did he arrive at Villa Diodati with the rest of the gang? Well, the truth is, Bram Stoker did write Dracula nearly 100 years later. The original concept and Stoker's actual inspiration, however, came from the diary observations of Dr. John Piodori, Lord Byron's physician. Basing his sophisticated, charming monster on his boss, Dr. Piodori hinted that Byron was just as dangerous as an immortal parasite, feeding off the lives of those around him. Simply entitled The Vampire and published in 1819, the story expanded on a scary ghost tale Byron himself had told the gang in Switzerland, a tale actually originating from legends that the poet heard while traveling in the Balkans. while also injecting his own personal sketches, most of which became the foundation of what we now imagine when we think of vampire mythology. So, anytime you see a semi handsome vampire with a moody disposition and dark clothing, you can thank Dr. Pilidori and Lord Byron for that. Although many believe Pilidori had published The Vampire out of spite, it's quite clear that Byron was no saint. While he continued to sleep with Claire, Byron refused to acknowledge that he was even the father. And once she returned back home to have their kid, he would not even return her letters. It was only when Claire arrived to Italy herself with their daughter Allegra did Byron agree to see his child, but under the condition that she be left solely in his care. Feeling trapped with no other options, Claire decided to leave her child with Byron, a decision she would viciously regret when Allegra died at age 5 from a fever in a convent Byron had left her in. Yeah, not such a great guy, right? Well, the Shelleys unfortunately did not fare much better. Despite attempts to keep a solid marriage while traveling extensively throughout Italy, Percy's philosophy on free love only made their relationship more difficult. Even worse, it was suspected that her stepsister and her husband were once again sleeping together. Things came to a head when Mary suffered yet another miscarriage, losing so much blood that she nearly lost her life. Although Percy had essentially saved her by putting her into a bath of ice, he would go on to spend, get this, he'd go on to spend more time with Jane Williams, one of his muses, than with his own recovering wife. And then, only months after Allegra passed, everything changed forever. While sailing home from an island with Jane Williams's husband, Edward, Percy's new boat sank. 10 days later, their bodies finally washed ashore. Prior to their sale, Percy discussed starting a political magazine with Lord Byron and their friend, the writer Leigh Hunt. In 2 years, however, Byron would also be dead. Although their lives ended in tragedy, there was something revolutionary about that group of romantic poets. Breaking away from the old image of writers as ancient recluses, these bold, brash youths established a new type of fame and glory, composing phenomenal works while causing controversy everywhere they went. To this day, they remain the ultimate blueprint of any artist desiring to buck tradition, court the media, and live freely. It's hard to say just how one moment can alter the complete course of history. But there's one thing I do know. That terrible, unfortunate year without a summer gave us a lifetime of genius. To this very day, we adore Frankenstein and Dracula for the thoughts they evoke, the images they conjure, and the possibilities they suggest. And I believe that kind of adoration will remain with us forever. Now, for more on this fascinating group, I implore you to read Young Romantics by Daisy Hay. It's an amazing, amazing book that goes much deeper into their wild, entangled lives because believe me, it gets even wilder and even more entangled. And also for a visual representation, I'm gonna recommend watching Gothic. Ken Russell's psychedelic mind blower. It takes place in the whole Villa Diodati Year Without a Summer, but it's got its own spin on it. It's got a mix of magic, a mix of trippy dreams, hallucinations. It's a crazy movie, but it's good. And I think it's one of the best representations of writers coming up with ideas. So definitely check that out. Gothic, Ken Russell. It's an 80s movie, I think 87, but check it out. But either way, thank you for listening to this first episode of Quills and Spills. I had a great time shooting the crap and talking about this insane year without a summer where these two incredible classics of literature came into fruition. So, thank you for joining me, and please subscribe and stay tuned for the next. And happy reading, everybody.